how are you? We're going to talk today about doing things God's way, living life God's way. And why do we do it God's way? Because God's way is better. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about today how God's way will equal success in my life. Now, what does that mean to live my life God's way? Well, it's to take the attitude that since God is smarter and bigger than me, I'm going to yield to what He wants to do more than what I want to do. It's not that I don't have any choice, but I take my life choices and I present them to God, and I sincerely ask God and seek His direction, seeing where and how and when He wants to take me, where He's going to go. It's having patience. It's having, and sometimes in church we call it waiting on God. But anyway, God's way is success. And I'm going to talk to you about a story about David in the Bible. King David, very famous guy. And David shows us a lesson on waiting on God or doing it God's way. See, what happened with David, David came in a time in his life where he had gotten anointed. He had gotten the official okay from God and the prophet to be king. And he was doing everything right. He was fighting in the army. He was backing up King Saul. But King Saul got jealous of him and he tried to kill him. So David, instead of going up the ladder of success, David had to go out to exile. He had to go live in a cave. He was hiding and trying to avoid the wrath of King Saul. But David still continued to do the right thing in the right way. He was being patient. He was waiting on God. And you can imagine David living in a cave, surrounded by a bunch of society losers, far away from his family, far away from his calling, far away from the greatness that God had for him. But he still was patient and waited for God to do things the right way. So what happens? Then you see it's in the Bible, in the book of Chronicles, you see God's time shows up, or the right time shows up, and then things start happening. David's in the cave, but then David starts seeing that people start coming to him from all over the different tribes of Israel, and God starts bringing an army to David, and they all start telling him, David, we're going to back you up, you should be on the throne. And God brings from every one of the 12 tribes the right men, the right people to come be on David's team to take David to the right place. And this is all because David waited on God's time. David did it the right way. God's way is the right way. God's way equals success. So what happened? So now I'm going to remind you, but in like 2 or 3 chapters that surround the story of David waiting on God, when David started conquering or taking back his position, but on God's time, in God's way, a lot of things started happening. And these are the things that can happen in your life and in my life as well when we decide to do things God's way. First of all, David was able to recapture Jerusalem. Now, what does that mean? Recapturing Jerusalem, David was able to retake what the enemy had stolen. And in your life, that can happen as well. Whatever the enemy has stolen, whether it be your health, your youth, your past, your family, your relationships, whatever bad has stolen from you, the enemy has stolen from you. When you do things God's way, you're in God's time and you have God's blessing on your life, you're able to go back and recapture and retake what the enemy took from your life. So David starts off by recapturing Jerusalem. He says to the enemy, it's not yours anymore, it's God's, and he takes control of it. As a matter of fact, it was called the city of David. So David retook what the enemy stole. Secondly, second thing in this progression, when you do things God's way, is you see David was able to bring back the ark to the city. Now, what is the Ark of the Covenant? Represents the presence of God. So when you wait on God, when you patiently wait for God's time to show up in your life, not only do you take back what the enemy stole from you, but you're able to bring the presence of God back into your life. And the ark, every time the ark was with them, God was with them, and things started happening better. And the same thing happens in your life. When you include God in your life, everything in which you include Him gets better. It's kind of like God is kind of like that one fun person that when you invite him to the party always gets good, gets better. So when you invite God to your party, whether it be your finances, your relationship, your work, your study, whatever it is, when you invite God to the party always gets better. So David, waiting on God, was able to bring back the ark, bring back the presence of God, and things started getting even better. Okay, so number 3, the third thing that happened when David waited on God and did it God's way, is David started started experiencing more personal prosperity. While he was in the cave, David was separated from his family. He had to ask some people to take care of his family for him. He could not take care of them because he wasn't there. But now, when we see David coming back to his position on God's way, you see that David goes back to his house, and Chronicles talks about how prosperity started coming to his house, how his wives started giving him more children, how everything started working out better even in the house. And that's what God does. The blessing of God is a holistic type of blessing. God doesn't just bless you on a Sunday morning, or he just doesn't bless you when you're reading a Bible or when you're giving to a church. God comes and invades your total life existence, and every single thing in your life starts getting blessed, even your family life, even your personal prosperity. When you take care of God's business, he'll take care of your business, and that's the kind of thing here. So we're seeing things that start happening positive in David's life when he started to do it God's way, when he waited on doing it God's way. He took back, number one, he took back what the enemy had stolen. Number two, he was able to bring back the ark, or the presence of God, into the city. Number three, he started to experience more personal prosperity. Number four, the fourth thing David was able to do by waiting on doing it God's way, is David was given the opportunity to take care of old business. What's old business? Well, the Philistines were the proverbial and continual pain in David's side. And once David started rebuilding the kingdom this way, there's a conversation David has, and David talks to God, and David asks him, should I go and attack these guys? Are you going to give me the success, the victory? And God tells him yes. And even in some missteps, God still directed him, and David was able to go to the Philistines, his old enemy, that old business, that stuff that was swept under the carpet, maybe the stuff that was threatening his past, and he was able to go take care of it. When you do things God's way, when you wait on God and live the way God wants you to live, then even the old business in your life, the things that you're hiding and you hope they don't peek back up, those skeletons in your closet, those old debts, all those things, God lets you go back and take care of those things, and lets you live free from the debt, not just financial debt, but free from the moral debt or the memory debt or anything in your past. You're able to take care of old business, and they're no longer a threat in your life, but now you have freedom to continue going forward. That's when you wait on God and do it God's way. Okay, now the other, continuing down the list of what happened is, after he took care of the Philistines, then you read in the Bible that David went back to the city, and then number five, he established a quality system of worship. David took time out from all these conquering and all these other kingly duties, and he went to the worship center, and he established who's going to do this, who's going to do that, who's going to be in charge of the songs, who's going to be in charge of this. He paid so much attention in organizing the worship that the worship started getting even better, and the way that they honored God was in a higher level. And in your own life, this is what God allows you to do. When you wait on God, when you do things and you do life God's way, things start happening where God allows you to establish a quality system of worship between you and God. And remember, worship is not just Sunday morning songs. Worship is your lifestyle, the choices you make, the places you go, the way that you represent God. That's your worship. It's more than a song, it's an internal attitude. Now, David was able to wait on God even through the difficult times. God shows up, God starts lining up all his ducks in a row, things start happening in a positive way, and David starts to get to this place where he establishes good quality worship, and God gets honored by this. And then the sixth thing that I want to tell you here of what happens is when you do it God's way, is God gets to a place where he promises even more. Let's get back and look at this. David was ready to be king, but it wasn't the right time yet. He persisted in doing the right thing. He persisted on being patient. He persisted on waiting on God. And when God's time showed up, everything started lining up and everything started happening. He was able to retake what the enemy had stolen from him. He was able to bring the ark back to the city. He was able to experience even more personal prosperity. He was able to take care of old business in his life. He was able to establish quality worship. And this last one, this number 6, he was able to see God promising even more in his life. Because now we see God talking to David after these things had occurred. And you see God talking to David as a father talks to his son, and you see the words in the Bible where God is like just so proud of David. He's saying, David, you've just done things the right way. I'm so proud of you. I'm so honored by the way you've honored me. And then God turns around and starts telling David, you know what? You don't worry about yourself, and don't worry about your son, and don't worry about your future, because God says, I'm going to give you my word that from here until eternity, there will always be one of your kings one of your descendants will be on the throne. In other words, your legacy will live on forever. And God tells him, and I'll take care of Solomon, I'll take care of your son, and everything's going to be good. You see God gushing with pride, with honor, with happiness, because David was wise enough to wait and do things God's way. And when David did this, God promises even more. And this is what God is telling you in your life. God has so much in store for you. God has so many things ready that he wants to give you. And we really are the only obstacle there is between God's blessings and our lives. So I'm going to encourage you, whatever is going on in your life, just be patient, sit back, take a deep breath. If things don't seem to be working out, just persist in doing the right thing, persist in trusting God, persist in behaving the right way, even when those around you may not be doing it, but you're going to be waiting on God. Because I guarantee when God's time comes around, then everything will line up, and you will be able to not only accomplish what you thought you were going to accomplish, but with God's help, you will accomplish infinitely more. And remember, this is not just a story we read in the Bible. This is a spiritual principle that's applicable 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and even today. When you put God first, when you decide to wait on God and do things God's way, everything is going to come out good. So I'm going to challenge you. That's the challenge for today, and I hope you receive that, and I hope you live it, and I'm sure God has some great things for you. Hey, I hope that you're enjoying what you're seeing here, and it's some kind of help or blessing to you. And if it is, I'm going to encourage you to like this video here. You could subscribe to the channel that we're doing here. You can even get ready to put that little bell and get alerts when we have some new stuff going on there. And on the bottom there, you can leave us a comment. We're here. We're looking for your feedback. We're encouraged to know that we can be of an encouragement to you, and we're just happy for you. God bless you.